Hey guys, tonight we journey back to the Wild West, but not the version with shiny cowboy hats and duels at high noon. No, you're stepping into a world that smells like cigar smoke, boot leather, and desperation. It's 1876, and your boots hit the dust of a newly minted boomtown somewhere between nowhere and nothing. You're broke, you're sunburned, and the only thing louder than your stomach is the piano spilling out of the saloon 2 doors down. A pair of eyes watches you from a second-story window, sharp, painted, calculating. That's the madam. She's already clocked you. She clocks everyone, and just so you know, you probably won't survive this dot, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere cozy, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the dirt, sun in your eyes, hunger riding you like a mule. There's no job board in a frontier town like this, just instinct and timing. You follow the noise to the saloon. The wood creaks under your feet as you push through swinging bat-wing doors. Inside, it's a blur of swirling skirts, clinking, glasses, and laughter a little too sharp to be genuine. Dot at the bar. Men pour their sorrows into cheap rye. Behind the counter, a barkeep with one eye and 3 fingers slams down mugs like he's punishing the wood. But your attention drifts upstairs. That's where the real power lives. The balcony railing is lined with velvet. One woman leans over it, sipping from a china teacup that definitely doesn't hold tea. She wears a corset tighter than sign and rings that glitter like desert stars. She doesn't blink when a fight breaks out below her. She's the madam, and she's not what you expected. You thought you'd meet some tragic woman with a broken past and a kind smile. Instead, you've stumbled into the orbit of a tactician, a real estate broker, a political whisperer, and a queen in a crumbling empire she helped build. Her name is stitched in whispers across the town: Miss Lucy, Madame Viola, Big Bell. Each town has one, and no two are alike. But what is alike? Every madam owns more than you'd guess. The saloon is hers, so is the brothel upstairs, the rooms above the stables, rented nightly, the laundry behind the church. She bought it after the owner had an accident. Historians still argue whether madams truly controlled local economies, or just navigated a male-dominated maze with grit and manipulation. But from where you're standing, her grip on this town feels as real as the revolver in her garter. You hover near the piano, watching how she works. A cowboy offers her a drink. She declines, but not before running a polished nail down the rim of her glass. 30 seconds later, the man is kicked out for not paying his tab. She knew he was broke the moment he walked in. The piano player speeds up. A pair of girls in garish silk giggle at a miner with a pocket full of fool's gold. Somewhere upstairs, a window closes with a soft click. You try to imagine what your options are in this place. Be a laborer? You'd be lucky to last a week before your back gives out. Sell trinkets on the street? This town chews up dreamers like jerky. No, if you want to survive, you need a roof, food, and someone who knows how to protect their own. That's her, a mainstream historical fact. In many boom towns, madams were among the first landowners. In Deadwood, Dodge City, and Tombstone, records show women purchasing lots outright before banks were even formally established. A quirky tidbit? One madam in San Francisco supposedly trained parrots to call out her house rates, $2 for a half hour, from the window to attract customers. Local preachers were not amused. As you linger by the door, the madam finally notices you. A slight tilt of her head, an invitation or a warning? It's hard to tell. You don't know it yet, but you've stepped into more than a saloon. This is a survival machine, with lace trim and a backup shotgun. Every smile is a transaction. Every laugh covers a calculation. And every woman who works here answers to the one wearing the silk gloves. You stay quiet and still, letting the night settle. Outside, gunshots echo faintly in the canyon beyond the town. Nobody even flinches. The madam descends the stairs with the grace of someone who knows she owns gravity. Her perfume hits before she does amber, roses, and something spiced and sharp. She stops next to you, looks you up and down. You need work? She asks, not unkindly. You nod. She tilts her head, considers. Then, start by sweeping the porch, and don't stare too long at Ruby. She bites. And just like that, you're part of her world. Or at least at the edge of it. You take the broom in hand like it's a weapon, which in a place like this, it kind of is. The porch is a patchwork of cracked boards and dried mud, the kind of grime that tells stories about last night's bar brawls and boot-tracked regrets. You sweep with your head down, but your ears open, because the real rules in a saloon aren't posted on the walls. They're whispered behind fans and muttered between sips of watered-down whiskey. Through the smudged window glass, you watch. The place transformed. It's still early mid-afternoon, but already the barmaids are drifting in. One adjusts her bodice in the mirror, lips pursed like she's biting back a curse. Another sways past with a tray full of clean glasses, humming something half-remembered and sad. And above it all, always above it, is the madam. She's not barking orders, not snapping her fingers. She doesn't have to, because here's the thing you learn fast. There's a hierarchy, and she built it. At the very bottom, there are the new girls. The ones who just arrived, sometimes fresh off the train, sometimes fresh off a broken promise. They don't speak much. Their eyes scan every room like they're still trying to find the exit. Above them are the barmaids. Don't let the tray fool you. These women can carry 10 drinks, duck a drunk's hand, and drop a man with a well-placed elbow, all without spilling a drop. They're not just serving ale, they're screening clients. The madam trusts them with the floor. And above the barmaids, the girls upstairs. They don't come down unless summoned. Their names are known, their schedules tight, their appearances timed for maximum effect. Some of them have regulars, others have reputations. One has a small dog that wears a silk ribbon and bites like a shark. Then there's the madam. She's not just the boss. She's the queen bee, the spider in the web, the accountant, the hostess, the fixer. She knows who's drinking too much, who's losing too much at cards, who's likely to start trouble. She makes introductions. She manages debts. And yes, sometimes she even plays matchmaker when there's money in it. Historians still argue whether madams were ruthless profiteers or reluctant caretakers forced into leadership by circumstance. But either way, She signs the pay slips and keeps a ledger so detailed it would make a banker blush. You're learning to stay invisible, but also observant. It's not long before you spot Ruby, the one you were warned about. She's perched at a corner table, red curls piled high, boots laced with turquoise beads. She's laughing at something a miner just said, but her eyes are locked on his coin pouch, not his smile. Later, you'll hear the full gossip. Ruby once poured hot coffee in a gambler's lap for calling her red. He left town that same night, pants still steaming. Another girl, tall Annie, sits near the piano, cleaning her nails with a bone-handled knife. She doesn't speak much, but when she does, the room listens. Rumor is she once killed a rattlesnake with her heel. Indoors, there's more to these women than paint and powder. You see it in the way they move, heads high, backs straight, eyes sharp. This isn't a place for wilting flowers. These are desert blooms, pretty, maybe, but thorned and sun-hardened. A mainstream fact? Many of the West's most successful madams didn't start wealthy. They worked their way up from housekeepers or working girls themselves. It wasn't glamour that made them rise. It was grit, math skills, and an uncanny ability to read a room. A quirkier tidbit: one Colorado madam kept a pet pig that wore a bonnet and had its own chair at the poker table. She claimed it brought luck. The sheriff disagreed. The pig won. Back at your post, you keep sweeping, letting the rhythm settle into your bones. The broom's rough handle scrapes your palms, but you don't stop. Not yet, because now you understand something. The madam's world isn't just about power. It's about control. Control of reputation, of rumors, of risk. She keeps her girls safe mostly, keeps her ledgers neat, keeps the sheriff from raiding most nights, and in return the town tolerates her. Some even respect her. Not openly, of course, not in the daylight, but when their sons go missing or their brothers get cheated at cards, they come knocking. And when she answers, it's always with that same calm expression, that same faint perfume, and maybe, just maybe, a faint glint of amusement. You don't know what you expected from a saloon like this, but you didn't expect elegance. You didn't expect order, and you definitely didn't expect to feel almost safe. Because in this place, safety is temporary. Loyalty is bought. And every woman here has a past she doesn't talk about unless she's spinning it into a story for a man who'll pay extra to feel special. The piano plays a little louder. The sun starts to dip low, and you, broom in hand, step inside again into the hierarchy, into the hum of commerce wrapped in lace, into the domain of the madam and her painted court. Welcome to your new normal. You don't realize how clean the place is until you see how much dirt you've tracked in. The madam notices, of course. She always does. With one raised eyebrow, she gestures toward the muddy prints and says with more charm than bite, "You planning to mop with your boots?" You mutter an apology and make yourself scarce, but you're already taking mental notes. This isn't just a saloon, it's a machine, one she keeps polished and humming like a pocket watch. And the centerpiece of it all is the building itself. From the outside, the structure looks like 100 other wooden husks scattered across the frontier. Weathered boards, creaky porch, paint blistered by the sun. But inside, that's where things change. Velvet curtains soften the light. Brass spittoons gleam beside polished boots. The bar stretches wide and smooth, an actual slab of imported oak. The floor doesn't just shine, it smells faintly of lavender oil. And lie. Even the spindled chairs, reinforced with steel rods, have their own battered dignity. You find yourself drawn to the small private parlor near the back, where the curtains are thicker and the laughter lower. It's quieter here, a hush that feels padded. You step inside and feel the sudden difference. There's a softness underfoot. Carpet, real carpet. You haven't seen that since, well, probably ever. Historians still debate whether the higher-end frontier saloons really had such luxurious appointments, or if those stories were inflated by dime novelists and romanticized memory. But here, you see it with your own eyes. Imported wallpaper, tea sets with tiny silver spoons, and a single rose in a narrow-necked vase. All deliberate, all curated. You take another step and nearly fall face first into a clawfoot bathtub dotted. Sit squarely in the middle of a back room like a shrine. The porcelain gleams. A hand-painted design of blue peacocks wraps around the rim. Next to it sits a tin pitcher, a bar of French soap wrapped in linen, and a stack of fresh towels. White towels. How? You don't dare touch it. You don't even breathe too close. But you remember the rumors. Madams were often the first in town to have indoor plumbing, or at least the illusion of it. Some hauled water by hand just to maintain the image. A clean house meant a clean reputation. A clean reputation meant trust. And trust meant survival. A mainstream fact? In towns like Virginia City and Leadville, madams were the first to install bathtubs, not just for hygiene, but as a business. Edge. They charged extra for bathing privileges, and it worked. Nothing attracted dusty cowboys like the promise of hot water and scented soap. But here's a fringe twist. One madam in Montana reportedly bathed in rainwater collected in a copper basin lined with rose petals, believing it preserved her youth. Her girls were strictly forbidden from using her supply. She called it her fountain of control. You step away before someone catches you gawking. The madam doesn't like snoopers unless they're useful. So instead you study the walls. The wallpaper is a faded red damask pattern. There are gold-framed paintings, landscapes mostly, nothing too personal. A few cherubs, a sunset, but tucked in one corner is a curious portrait. A woman in full morning dress, one hand clutching a closed parasol, the other resting on a Bible. Her eyes follow you. You swear they do. Maybe it's the lighting. Or maybe this place is already playing tricks on you. In the main room, the piano starts again. The madam has returned to her perch upstairs. A new customer walks in, kicking the door a little too hard. A trail of dust follows him, but no one flinches. Ruby swings around with a smile that could melt lead, and suddenly it's like the man never even stopped. You begin to notice how everything, every object, every routine is engineered. Tables are placed to guide foot traffic. Lanterns are hung at just the right height to catch the glitter on the girls' dresses. Even the floorboards are nailed down to creak in certain spots strategically, so the madam always knows who's coming and going. This building is her eyes, her ears, her weapon. She built it to protect herself. From what? You wonder. From every one dot you follow the hallway deeper into the house. pretending to check for leaky ceilings like you've been assigned to. What you find instead is a tiny reinforced door, bolted tight, with a slit for coins. Behind it, the safe room. You heard about those. Every serious madam has one, where the real ledgers go, where the bribe money lives, where the backup revolver is wrapped in silk just in case. There's a rusted horseshoe nailed above the doorframe. For luck? Maybe. Or maybe for misdirection, you turn around and nearly collide with the thick-armed woman, who mutters something about fresh eggs and elbows you gently aside. You thank her and move back toward the main floor, careful not to disturb the rhythm. There's a logic to the building now. It breathes in customers and breathes out profit. Every crevice has a purpose. Every mirror angle reveals something useful, and you begin to understand. This place is more than just shelter. It's a statement. It says, we're not some backwater dive. It says, this is where the money is. It says you don't mess with the woman who built this. And they don't. Even the sheriff who walks by twice a night, just checking, doesn't cross the threshold unless invited. And when he does, he takes off his hat. You lean against the polished bar, letting your fingers trace the notches, carved over time. Each one has a story. You wonder how many of them the madam remembers. Probably all of them. Behind you, the room starts to fill. Laughter rises, cards slap, a cork pops, and somewhere upstairs, a lock clicks shut with a sound. That says, everything here is exactly as she planned it. You take a breath. The night's just beginning, and so is your education. The thing no one tells you about working in a saloon, especially one run by a madam, is that the rules matter more than the liquor. You'd think this was a place of chaos, cards flying, boots stomping, whiskey pouring, but underneath the noise, it's a quiet ballet of boundaries. And if you break one, well, you won't do it twice. You're starting to pick them up, the rules, spoken and not. Some are obvious. Don't fight indoors. Don't stiff the girls. Don't cheat at cards unless you're really good at it. But others are stranger, subtler, like never sit in the corner booth unless invited. Always knock twice on the third upstairs door. Don't ever touch the piano when Jackson's playing it. He once broke a man's fingers for less. And then there are the madam's rules. These aren't written down. You learn them by watching, or by watching someone else break one. Like today, a lanky cowboy new in town, still swaggering like he hasn't been humbled, yet decides to test the waters. Orders a drink, flirts too long with Ruby, then slaps her backside as she walks away. You don't even have time to blink. The room goes still. Ruby turns slowly, like she's winding a music box in reverse. No smile now. She doesn't say a word. She doesn't have to. The madam descends the stairs one step at a time, heels clicking like a clock. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't curse. She simply places a gloved hand on the man's shoulder and leans in. What she says is too soft to hear, but whatever it is, it drains the color right out of him. He leaves, fast, doesn't finish his drink, doesn't touch the door, just pushes through like the building itself wants him gone. You never see him again. Historians still argue whether these women enforced their own rules because the law ignored them or because they preferred it that way. Maybe both. The truth is, the madam is the law here, and her justice is swift, private, and sometimes surprisingly elegant. That cowboy? He's lucky. Others weren't. There's a dent in the wall behind the bar, covered by a calendar now. But you've heard the story. A gambler who wouldn't pay, a thrown bottle, and a bullet meant to scare that went through his hat instead. The madam cleaned up the blood herself, then had coffee. But not all punishments are loud. Some are as quiet as a lost shift, a vanished customer base, a whispered rumor that you're unreliable, and suddenly you're working in a dive down the road, earning half the coin and none of the respect. You start to understand the real genius of it. The madam doesn't need to shout. She's built a system where everyone benefits from keeping the peace. The girls know their percentages. The bartender knows the backup stash. Even the town preacher knows better than to ask where she gets the funds to repair the chapel windows. A mainstream historical fact? Many madams imposed strict internal codes. In some houses, women were fined for swearing, drinking on duty, or not brushing their hair. In others, curfews were enforced with military precision bells at midnight, doors locked by 12:15. But here's a quirkier one. A famous madam in Nevada reportedly had a rule that all her girls had to read at least one book a week. Not for moral uplift, but to sound smarter and charge more. She even ran a little library behind the powder room. And then there's the etiquette between the women themselves. This isn't some sisterhood of unbreakable bonds. It's more like a collection of temporary truces built on shared survival and mutually assured scandal. But the madam keeps it balanced. Fighting among the girls? Forbidden. Unless sanctioned, then it's scheduled, supervised, and usually ends in champagne and apologies. Stealing? That'll get you walked out without your boots. But loyalty? Loyalty gets rewarded. You've seen it firsthand. The madam slips tall Annie a silk scarf after she handles a belligerent customer with her usual quiet menace. Ruby gets a half day off after a long night with a group of railroad men. Even the cook gets extra coffee beans when she catches someone sniffing around the safe door. It's a kingdom of rewards and consequences. You start keeping your head down, more less sweeping, more listening. You learn which girls are favorites, which ones are climbing the invisible ladder, and which ones are teetering near the edge. There's Dolly, who sings sad songs when she thinks no one's listening. There's Marta, who speaks 4 languages and swears in 6. And then there's little Elsie, barely taller than the broom, who's new, too quiet and clearly on someone's bad side. You ask what she did. She left the window open, Ruby mutters. Let the dust in. That's it. That's enough. Because when the madam says the curtains must stay closed, they stay closed. Not just for dust, but for privacy, for control, for illusion. Customers must imagine mystery. They must not see reality. That's the trick. And when you mess with the illusion, you pay sometimes with coin, sometimes with status, sometimes with your job. The rules aren't about cruelty. They're about maintaining the ecosystem. A place like this doesn't run on luck. It runs on choreography. You're not just sweeping anymore. You're stage crew. The girls are performers. The bar is the set. The madam, director, producer, lighting designer, and box office and you, broom in hand, have just learned your most important line. Don't touch the piano. You wouldn't expect branding to matter in a town that barely has printed signs. But, oh, does it matter? In the Wild West, where even the churches looked like temporary barns, a madam's reputation was her marketing campaign, and she worked harder at image control than a politician with a dirty past. You see it one morning when you're oiling the saloon's front steps. A traveling salesman comes through town suit, dusty, samples rattling in his wagon, and he pauses at the bottom stair. "Is this Miss Delphine's place?" he asks, already smoothing his beard. Before you can answer, the madam appears in the doorway. She doesn't even raise her voice, just says, "It is. You're 2 days early." He apologizes, hat off, suddenly deferential. That's branding. Delphine, yes. That's her name, has built a legend out of thin air, expensive cologne, and ruthless consistency. Every detail is a calculated message. The velvet sign hanging out front, stitched by a former girl who now sews for the mayor's wife, the pressed flowers placed beside the spittoon, the French phrases she sprinkles into conversation like breadcrumbs, and it works in a town where most signs are hand-painted on scrap wood and misspelled. Her saloon signage gleams in gold leaf. You've watched passers-by squint at it like it's a bank or a courthouse. No one dares call it a whorehouse out loud, not unless they want to be corrected with icy elegance and a story about hospitality culture. Historians still debate whether this kind of image control was necessary or just self-indulgent, but the results are hard to argue with. Her clientele includes bankers, railroad officials, army lieutenants, even a senator once, though he pretended to be a dentist. Inside, the branding continues. Her girls don't dress alike, they coordinate. Jewel tones on Wednesdays, ribbons on payday, new lace on the first of the month. She even names the rooms upstairs, the Rose Room, the library, the Magnolia Suite. You hear one cowboy boasting he spent the night in the conservatory. No one tells him it's a glorified broom closet with wallpaper. That's the magic, perception over reality. You hear the madam once describe it as selling possibility. Not just the girls, not just the drink. The feeling that you've walked into a finer life, one with crystal glasses and slow dances, one with manners and class, even if your boots are caked in cow dung. A mainstream fact? Many frontier madams actively curated their reputations by donating to schools, churches, or widows' funds, earning public goodwill, even while skirting social respectability. In some towns, their donations literally kept local infrastructure running. A more fringe tidbit? One madam in New Mexico famously burned her own establishment down once a year to rebuild it better, using the insurance money and public sympathy to upgrade her parlor each time. Locals called her the Phoenix. You start noticing how she shapes her story. She speaks in third person sometimes. Miss Delphine does not negotiate rates. She'll say, or Miss Delphine's girls always wear gloves on Sundays. You don't know if it's drama or defense, but it draws a line between her and everyone else, between the brand and the woman behind it. There's even a house newsletter. Well, not exactly. But once a month she pens a letter on creamy parchment and has one of the girls write it to nearby towns. The note includes Saloon updates, guest policy changes, and a brief weather report. She signs it, with respects and restraint. Madame D, every other saloon in the area, scoffs at it, and then copies it. Even inside the house, the branding never drops. The kitchen staff refer to her as La Patronne. You're not sure if that's French or just affectation. But you whisper it too now. It's safer. And then there are the mirrors. So many mirrors. Not for vanity, but for surveillance. They reflect angles, catch movement. She knows who's walking upstairs, who's lingering at the bar too long, who's slipping a bottle into their coat. She once caught a thief with nothing but a tilt of her head toward the sconce above the piano. "Check your left pocket," she told him, smiling like a cobra. He did. He turned pale. He left. No one asks how she saw it. They just believe, because Miss Delphine is always watching. You realize that even you are now part of her marketing. When customers ask, "How long you been here?" you don't say 3 weeks and counting every splinter. You say, "Long enough to know there's no finer house west of Denver," because that's what she trained you to say. And you believe it. Almost. One night, a rival madam shows up, lace parasol, smile sharp as barbed wire. Her name's Miss Letty, and she's from 2 towns over. She strides in like she owns the floor. Miss Delphine doesn't flinch, doesn't blink, just walks over, takes her gloved hand, and compliments her perfume. Letty smiles. Delphine smiles wider. They talk like queens at a ball. And then Letty leaves. The next day, a mysterious letter circulates about questionable hygiene practices at a nearby parlor. No name mentioned. But you catch Delphine smiling over her teacup. That's branding too. Reputation is a weapon in the West, and Delphine sharpens hers daily. You polish the brass railings a little longer that night, and you begin to wonder, who was she before all this? How does someone become this? But you don't ask Dot, because if she wanted you to know, it would already be part of the story. The beaded curtains in the back parlor don't just muffle sound. They separate worlds. You're invited through for the first time on a Tuesday, a quiet day, mostly, but the tension in your shoulders knots the moment the strands part behind you. It's dim in here, warm, smells like pipe tobacco, rose water, and paper. The madam sits at a table with 2 men. One wears a bowler hat and smiles too much. The other has a mustache wide enough to require zoning. On the table between them, a ledger, a half-empty decanter, and 3 piles of coins sorted by gleam. She doesn't look up as you enter, just says, "Tea, please." You fetch it, set it down, back away, but not out of earshot. You've learned better. The conversation is all double meanings. "Well, if the surveyor's plans go through, that corner plot will jump in value," says Bowler Hat. "Wouldn't hurt to have friends already holding deed." Miss Delphine nods. "Of course, and I assume you'll handle the paperwork?" Mustache Man grunts. "If we can keep the preacher quiet this time." They all chuckle. You understand then that business in a saloon like this extends far beyond whiskey and velvet. Miss Delphine deals in real capital. Land speculation, transport routes, sugar shipments that may or may not be legal. Historians still argue whether madams truly ran underground networks of influence, or simply had access to information men underestimated. But listen long enough, and you'll start connecting dots no one draws on paper. Bowler Hat, you later learn, is a county clerk, the one who files land titles. Mustache, a rancher with more debt than cattle. And the ledger? Well, it isn't her. Books, it's theirs. She's just helping them rearrange things. For a cut, you're sent out before anything scandalous happens. But you leave with more than you came in with. Dot by nightfall, you've started recognizing signs of side deals playing out all around you. One of the barmaids is discreetly handing a sealed envelope to a telegraph boy twice in 1 week. The cook suddenly has an extra crate of sugar, even though the local grocer's been out for days. And then there's the sheriff, who now stops by every Friday night for a cigar and a quiet game of chess. Nobody's playing chess, a mainstream historical fact. Some madams were known to be heavily involved in city politics, acting as informal bankers, message couriers, and power brokers. In Helena, Montana, one madam reportedly bankrolled the mayor's campaign in exchange for zoning protection for her boarding house. But let's sprinkle in a stranger tidbit. A famous saloon in Texas had a hidden trapdoor behind the bar that led to an underground tunnel used to smuggle opium, letters, or unwanted guests out the back. Depending on the night, you start noticing new visitors, men in crisp coats, women dressed too fine for this dusty town, slipping into private rooms with firm handshakes and tight lips. And Delphine? She doesn't hide it. She hosts it. She offers tea, offers alibis, and takes a 10% handling fee for any transaction over $100. You catch fragments of other deals. A widow needing quick cash and offering mineral rights. A rancher who wants a local judge to forget a boundary. Dispute. A shipment of wine that may or may not be fermented cactus juice. Sometimes you think she's part businesswoman, part mob boss. Other times, you think she's just the only one smart enough to wear gloves while everyone else's hands are dirty. Dot, and then there's the ledger. Her real ledger, you've only seen it once. Locked in a drawer beneath her writing desk. Bound in deep red leather, edges too crisp for casual use. One night, she leaves it open when she steps out to settle a bar dispute. You glance. Just once. Dot, it's not numbers. Not prices. Dot, it's names. Dot, dates. Dot, A-S-T-E-R-I-S-K-S. Dot, some are circled, some underlined, some crossed out completely. You don't ask, because you understand something now. The saloon isn't just a business. Dot, it's an archive. Every drink poured is a favor earned. Every broken rule is a test. Every smile she offers is carefully rationed for maximum yield. Dot. And if you're lucky, you become part of her machinery, not a cog, something more useful, something more invisible. Dot, like now. A regular customer, Mr. Hawthorne, banker, nervous laugh, good tipper whispers to you after 2 whiskeys. Let Miss D know the Northern Pacific boys are moving through town Friday. She want to be ready. You pass the message. Quietly. Dot, she doesn't thank you. Just adjusts her glove and says you'll be cleaning the upstairs hall tomorrow, early. And that's when you realize the hall's where she meets the railroad men. You've just been promoted. Dot, not officially. Not with pay. Dot, but in her system, even information has a price. And now you're worth something. It's not always subtle. You find that out the night someone fires a pistol into the ceiling. Dot, no warning. No lead up, just a bang that silences the piano and sends everyone's hearts thudding against their ribs. Dust falls in a gentle drizzle. From the ceiling beam, the man holding the gun is drunk, red-eyed, and shaking. He waves the weapon around like he's still trying to decide if it's a threat or punctuation. Everyone freezes, except Miss Delphine. Dot, she steps forward with terrifying calm. No shriek, no gasp, no ducking under tables. just the soft creak of her silk shoes as she glides across the floor. She looks at the man, some miner, you think, or a gambler, one of the types who smell like regret and kerosene. Her voice cuts clean through the silence. Darling, you're pointing that in the wrong direction. He laughs, high and weird, still waving it. And that's when you learn what it really means to be a madam, because Delphine doesn't wait for the sheriff. She doesn't wait for some mustached hero with a white hat. She moves like someone who's done this before. With a flick of her wrist, something glints in her hand, small, fast, and sudden. You hear a sharp sound like leather snapping, and then the man crumples sideways, clutching his thigh, a throwing knife, concealed in her corset. You didn't even know she wore a knife. He doesn't die. Not tonight. But he'll walk funny, and he'll tell everyone he tripped, which is exactly how Delphine wants it. Historians still argue whether madams routinely carried weapons or left that work to bouncers and bodyguards. But anecdotes abound in knives and parasols, derringers and hat boxes, pistols tucked into boots. These women didn't hope to be safe. They prepared to be dangerous. That night, after the blood is cleaned and the regulars go back to their drinks like nothing happened, she gives you a new task. Check the lock boxes in the back and move the shotgun closer to the stairs. You nod. You don't ask which shotgun, Dot. By now you know better, Dot. It's not the first time you've seen violence here. It won't be the last. One girl Marta once knocked out a customer with a poker chip jar. Ruby keeps a straight razor in her garter. Tall Annie, it's whispered, has a revolver with each of her sisters' names etched into the cylinder. The truth is, this world requires armor, and no one wears it better than the madam. But her armor isn't just steel. It's posture. It's planning. It's planning. It's knowing every corner of her building and exactly who's sitting at every table. It's trusting no one entirely and yet convincing everyone that you might. A mainstream fact? Many Wild West saloons operated without official law enforcement, for miles relying on their own muscle or the reputation of the women in charge to deter theft, assault, or worse. In several towns, local sheriffs were on madam's payroll, not for favors, but for staying away. But here's an offbeat tidbit. One madam in Oregon reportedly trained her parlor girls in stage combat and let them act out bar fights to entertain crowds. It was all fake until one night. It wasn't. Delphine doesn't stage fights. She ends them and then sends the broken pieces home in a box. You begin to see how much of her power is in not flinching. She never panics. Stop. When? A chair breaks when a horse dies in the street. When a judge drops in unannounced, she reacts like she knew it was coming all along. Her calm is contagious. It spreads like perfume. One night, you spot a man in a brown duster trying to sneak upstairs. He's tall, silent, and careful, until he reaches the second stair, the one that always creaks. You're not brave. Not exactly. But you step in his path anyway. Wrong door, you say. Third one's got a dog behind it. He stops, smiles tight, turns around. You tell Delphine later. She doesn't nod, doesn't thank you, just says, move your bedroll upstairs. You're watching the hallway now. Another promotion got the hallways quieter, more private. But it's not safer. Not really. This is the floor where secrets live. You hear more than you want to. Late night sobs. Angry whispers. The kind of sigh that means someone's heart had just cracked open. You don't ask questions. You check locks. You wipe down banisters. You keep a club behind the curtain. Just in case, you notice Delphine has her own roots now. Not through doors, through panels, hinges, back staircases. She's everywhere and nowhere. Like the building's bones are tuned to her breath. Some nights, she plays the piano herself, badly. She single quotes S. No Jackson. But when the house is quiet and the lamps are low, she sits at the keys and taps out some slow waltz she must have learned. When she was still soft, you listen from the hallway. You never mention it, because for all her knives and ledgers and secrets, she still plays, still dares to be fragile when no one's watching. That might be her greatest act of defiance, and her greatest risk. By now you understand, this place doesn't run on charm. It runs on numbers. Quiet, steady, ruthless numbers. You're polishing the brass rail along the staircase when the madam appears beside you, ledger in hand. No makeup today, no silk, just a practical dress with ink on the sleeve and a look that says, I don't have time for nonsense. She hands you a sheet of paper and says, copy these. No explanation. You glance down. It's a list of names, room rates, liquor tallies, and what appear to be laundry fees. Delphine raises an eyebrow. What, you thought Glamour paid for all this? Sit down, sweetheart. Time to learn how the sausage gets funded. You pull up a chair at the parlor table, and for the first time, she opens the books in front of you, and oh, it's beautiful. In a terrifying, brain-bending way, she's tracking everything, room rentals by hour, bottle sales by ounce, even wear and tear costs for lace gloves and ribbon stock. There are columns for house cuts, girl tips, maintenance expenses, bribes, labeled as civic smoothing, and an entire color-coded section just for linens. The margins are full of shorthand. Her own private code. D10 equals 3 probably means someone stayed in room 10 for 3 hours. WW plus 2X equals caution is well. It's better not to guess too loudly. A mainstream fact? Most madams were financially literate in ways few women of their era were allowed to be. They kept ledgers, managed payroll, budgeted supplies, and often served as informal bankers for other townspeople who had nowhere else to go. A quirkier detail? One notorious madam in Deadwood reportedly used peppermint oil to mark bills with invisible house stamps. So if a customer tried to reuse the same note or pass counterfeit, she could tell by scent alone. Imagine sniffing your own profits. As Delphine leans over your shoulder, she taps a line with her finger. See this? That's the rose room. Brings in 20% more than the magnolia. Why? You stammer something about better light. Maybe softer furniture? No, she says. It's the name. Rose sounds gentler, hopeful. People pay extra for hope. You write it down. She doesn't smile. Over the next week, she shows you more. Not everything, never everything, but enough to know the truth. This isn't a parlor house. It's a finely tuned profit engine with a piano and a liquor license. You learn that. Girls rent their rooms nightly with optional linen service. The house takes 40% of each client fee, sometimes more if wine is served. Any broken furniture comes out of your next 3 cuts. And if a guest leaves in a hurry, you clean it up. Not her, Dot. Everything is billable. Everything has a margin. She tracks seasonal fluctuations, payday rushes, the weather's impact on whiskey orders. There's even a note about full moon fever and how to increase security around it. Historians still argue whether madams charged too much, took advantage of their girls, or simply modeled the capitalist systems of the men around them. But Delphine? She doesn't pretend to be virtuous. She just knows her math. You want to survive? She tells you one night, lighting a cigarillo with practiced grace. Learn your break-even points. You nod. You think you understand. But then you find the drawer, Dot. It's half open in the office after she steps out. You shouldn't look. But curiosity has its own gravity. Inside, a second ledger. This one is ... different ... It lists names. Men's names. Beside each, dates, fees, behavior notes. There are stars, circles, little frowny faces, and once a red X. It's a blacklist. You close the drawer gently, pretending you never saw it. Later, when a man with a red X walks in and is turned away at the door without a word, you know exactly why. And you keep your mouth shut, Dot. You ask Delphine once if he ever forgets a name. Not once, she says. That's how you get burned. You notice she keeps a second lockbox hidden in the floorboards, one for cash flow, one for favors. Because sometimes favors are worth more than coin, and they always have interest. There's a file marked pending that's just ... odd. A list of traveling performers, a land survey, a note that reads, "Wait until the mind vote settles." You realize she's not just tracking her business, she's anticipating everyone else's and adjusting accordingly. Once, you ask her why she doesn't invest in something simpler, a boarding house, a tea shop, something less dangerous. She snorts. You think tea shops don't have knives in the kitchen? Fair. Then, with a rare flicker of honesty, she adds, besides, nothing simpler than math. People, they lie. Numbers don't. You carry that line with you like a keepsake. From then on, you track your own ledger too, your hours, your observations. A crude amateur version of her book. She never acknowledges it, but one day she leaves you a fountain pen in your room, just sitting there. No note. And that's when you know you're not just a broom boy anymore. You're being trained, not for bar work, for business. It starts with a feather, not just any feather, long, brilliant plume-dyed deep emerald green, tucked into Ruby's hair one Saturday evening, like it had grown there. You notice it immediately. So does everyone else. It bobs when she moves. It gleams when the light hits it just right. It turns heads, closes tabs, opens wallets. The next week, all the girls wear feathers. Delphine's idea, of course. A simple accessory replicated in a dozen shades, coordinated by night of the week. Ostrich for elegance, peacock for drama, duck down for the new girls, delicate and unassuming. And just like that, the place feels transformed. It's not just about beauty, it's about presentation. Delphine uses fashion the way a card sharp uses aces, hidden, intentional, and always close to the chest. You're sent to unpack a delivery one morning and discover a crate of gloves, corsets, perfumes, hairpins, and something called French pomade that smells like oranges dipped in brandy. There's a note attached to one vial. Only for Marta, too strong for the rest. Even the perfume is weaponized. Delphine doesn't believe in coincidence. She believes in image, and she crafts it like a war general lays out a battlefield. Mainstream historical fact? Many madams ordered clothing and beauty goods from catalogs like Montgomery Ward or Sears and Roebuck, sometimes months in advance. These were luxury items on the frontier powder compacts, velvet gloves, imported soaps, and they served to distinguish upscale houses from the rowdier saloons. And a weirder footnote? One madam in Kansas commissioned a dress made entirely from discarded playing cards, which she wore to a charity ball as both fashion and metaphor. It crinkled when she walked. The town talked about it for weeks. Delphine prefers silk. She has a wardrobe with secret compartments. You've seen her emerge wearing crimson and gold when the railroad men visit, and soft gray lace when the preacher's widow stops in for tea. She knows what color means. Red equals power. White equals innocence. Green equals money. Black equals don't test me. But even more than color, it's posture. You've watched her sit beside the mayor's assistant with her wrists delicately crossed and her smile precisely measured. 3 seconds on, one breath, a blink. Like clockwork. And then, with a rancher who's had too much bourbon, she slouches slightly, drops her voice an octave, and says, "I swear, you're the only man around here who can hold a decent conversation." He believes it. Of course he does. She choreographed it. The girls learn from her, slowly, subtly. You see, Ruby adjusts her gait after watching Delphine descend the stairs one night. You notice Annie swapping out her worn boots for polished ones, and suddenly charging more per hour. Even the newer girls start applying their rouge with a little more intention. It's not just glamour, it's armor. A silk corset means you belong to this house, not the one down the road. A ribbon in the hair means off-duty. A silver locket? That's how you know who's protected. You're asked to iron lace one evening, and as your fingers move carefully across the fabric, you realize just how much of Delphine's power lives in the details. Nothing is casual. Not the flowers on the windowsill, not the bell on the desk, not the particular way the curtain tassels hang to guide a gentleman's eye. She turns femininity into misdirection. Softness as camouflage, powder as performance. One night she hands you a box. Deliver this to room 4. Inside, a pair of shoes with steel-reinforced heels. You don't ask. Later, you'll hear someone tried to get rough with Marta. Marta did not appreciate that. Neither did her heel. Violence may be rare, but preparation? That's constant. Some of the girls carry knives, others prefer hat pins. Ruby has a hair comb she once described, lovingly, as good for eyes. Delphine herself favors a fan, a black lace fan with a bone handle that conceals a flicked blade. She only uses it for the worst offenders, like that gambler who once made the mistake of calling her honey. He left town with stitches and no boots. The fan still hangs behind the bar. Delphine rotates accessories, each season fur in winter, gauze in summer, but the core message never changes. Look like money, and you'll be treated like it. It's contagious. Even you start fixing your collar more carefully, wiping your boots before you enter. She's got everyone playing their part. You once hear a miner mutter, "Place looks like a blasted opera house." Then he sits down, pays triple for whiskey, and tips Ruby a gold coin. exactly as planned. The girls may giggle and flirt, but you see how they eye each other in the mirror, competitive, calculating. That's part of the game, too. You don't just dress to impress the customers. You dress to keep your spot. And when the feathers molt and the perfume fades, Delphine replaces them. Before anyone notices, she says, people forget faces. They remember feeling. Make them feel like this place is something rare. You think about that every time you polish a doorknob or sweep the rug. Every time you see a girl check her reflection twice before stepping into the hallway. They're not just getting ready. They're arming themselves, and the war they're fighting, it's subtle, it's slow. It's 1 6-inch heels and 1-inch ledgers. You don't know who lit the fire. Maybe it was an accident. A knocked-over lantern, a careless cigar. But no one really believes that. Not when it's her place that burns. Not when it's after Miss Letty was seen leaving town with a smile on her lips and soot on her hem dot. It happens fast. You're in the back hall, fixing a latch that squeaks too loud when you smell smoke. Not fireplace smoke, this is sharper, hotter. You hear shouting, boots thudding on floorboards. The sudden panicked squawk of the parlor macaw, who usually only says, "Tips, please." Then the madam's voice, calm, too calm, all girls too. The alley, no arguments. You don't hesitate. Smoke curls down the stairwell like a whisper turning into a scream. The barroom is full of heat and confusion. Marta's got one boot on and one off. Ruby's dragging the account ledger in a pillowcase. Annie is carrying the good whiskey. Priorities dot outside. The girls gather in a loose circle, coughing, barefoot, shaken. No one speaks. You count heads. You count again. Everyone's there. Delphine appears last, cloak thrown over her shoulders, hair down, eyes blazing, not with panic, but calculation. She's not thinking about loss. She's thinking about what comes next. Historians still argue whether rivalries between madams got violent or whether tales of arson and sabotage were inflated by fiction writers and local gossip. But you've seen enough sideways glances and sudden coincidences to know sabotage wasn't just possible. It was standard practice. Delphine doesn't cry. She doesn't scream. She looks at the flames consuming her velvet curtains and her polished bar and says only, "We'll need a place by Monday." You watch her move, immediately delegating. Ruby to find new linens. Annie to handle permits. You? Find out who sold Miss Letty that new team of horses. I want the receipt. Because this isn't just a fire. It's a message. And Delphine? She always replies. The next week she's already opened a temporary parlor above the dry goods store. It smells like soap and hay. The wallpaper peels. The chairs don't match, but the girls are dressed like queens. The whiskey is still watered, just right, and the piano still plays every night at 9. You hear whispers from the customers. Didn't miss a beat. Thought she was finished. Should have known better. A mainstream fact. Saloons and parlor houses were often targeted by city ordinances or vigilante groups aiming to clean up boomtowns. But madams adapted some bought properties under false names, bribed inspectors, or simply rebuilt farther out of town. One fringe tidbit: a madam in Nevada reportedly built her new saloon on wheels after being evicted 3 times. She'd simply move it out of town limits and keep operating. She called it the rolling room. Delphine doesn't need wheels. She is reach. Within a month, the new place modest at first is buzzing. She's negotiated new suppliers, rehired the cook, and managed to reframe the fire as a blessing in disguise. In a letter she sends to her clientele list, the note ends with, "Just like a phoenix, we rise smarter, sharper, silkier." You admire it. You also notice a subtle dig, a reference to Miss Letty's old nickname, the Phoenix. Coincidence? Please dot, and then strange things start happening. A letter goes missing from the mayor's office. A clerk resigns unexpectedly. One of Letty's girls shows up outside your parlor house, crying, suitcase in hand. You don't ask questions. You show her the linen closet and tell her when dinner's served. Delphine watches it all unfold with the cool detachment of someone orchestrating a four-move checkmate, and then quietly Letty's place closes. Inspection issues, the town paper says. Water damage, they whisper. No one really knows, but everyone suspects. Delphine says nothing. She just replaces the velvet on the chairs. It's not over. These things never really are. But for now, her name is secure. You start to understand how fragile this all is. Reputation in a town like this is currency, maybe even more than coin, and Delphine guards hers with razor wire. She never speaks ill of anyone, at least not in public. But you've seen how rumors start, seemingly from nowhere. You've seen how customers vanish from rival parlors like ghosts. All it takes is a word here, a suggestion there. "Oh, I heard their linens weren't clean. Did you see the bruises on that girl's arm? Funny smell in that hallway." Just enough to tip the balance. And in the Wild West, once your reputation slips, it slides fast. Delphine doesn't just win by being better. She wins by staying cleaner, louder, smarter, and by making sure that anyone who tries to bring her down is too busy putting out their own fires. You watch her sign off another letter, blot the ink carefully, and turn to you. "You still have that list of bar suppliers?" You nod. "Good," she says. "We're raising the liquor rates. If people think we're fancier now, we will be. You wouldn't expect it sisterhood here, in a place where survival depends on who charges more, who wears it better, who gets invited upstairs, and who gets shut out. But it exists. Not soft, not sentimental. Something colder, sharper, strategic. You see it first in a letter. It arrives by coach, folded neatly, sealed with a pink wax stamp shaped like a fan. Delphine doesn't open it in front of you, of course. She never does. But later that night, she disappears into her office with a fountain pen and reemerges with an envelope addressed to Madame V. Crane in Denver. You dare to ask. "An old friend," she says with a half-smile. "Sometimes you trade recipes, sometimes you trade scandal." You blink. "She's sending me a list," Delphine adds. "I'm sending her something better. You never find out what." But 2 weeks later, a shipment of embroidered silk gloves arrives. No invoice, just a note. "Use these before the train crowd comes through. The banker likes blue." It's not the only letter. There are dozens. In a locked drawer, carefully bundled in twine. Some are short, one sentence, no signature. Others ramble with gossip, warnings, lists of names and new girls and men who don't pay. There's even one with a smear of lipstick and the words, "She stole my best girl, and I hope her stairs collapse." Historians still argue whether madams operated genuine networks of mutual support or were simply rivals cloaked in civility? The truth? Both. Because in this world, your best ally might be your worst enemy tomorrow. But tonight? Tonight you need each other. You learn that these letters are more than correspondence. They're currency. A name shared here, a warning there. He leaves without paying. She's underage claims she's not. Avoid the redhead. She carries knives. A mainstream historical fact? There's documented evidence that madams in the American West maintained informal communication networks through mail, coded telegrams, or word of mouth delivered by traveling performers, drummers, or even clergy. They warned each other about violent customers and exchanged hiring opportunities. And a fringe tidbit? One madam in Nevada used to send coded messages baked into gingerbread cookies. You heard that? Right, she mailed cookies as encrypted gossip bombs. Each sprinkle meant something. You begin to see the threads. One girl from Delphine's house gets poached by another saloon 2 towns over. Delphine doesn't rage. She writes a letter. 3 weeks later, the girl comes back with nicer clothes and a tighter contract. She doesn't speak about what happened, but she always looks over her shoulder now. Some alliances are real. Miss Crane in Denver? Real. So is Madame Honrine in San Francisco. You hear their names spoken like saints when a shipment arrives early, or when the town magistrate suddenly stops checking in. Others? Fragile. Delphine gets a letter from someone she doesn't trust, too polite, too clean. She responds with a forged signature and a fake name, just to see what happens. You never hear about that woman again. Then there's the code. You notice it one evening as she dictates a letter to you purely because her hands are ink-stained and she wants her glove line to stay neat. You write. Business remains steady. Wheat, flour, low. 3 small rooms vacant, but prospects promising. What she means, money's fine. Staff turnover is manageable. Watch for new girls applying soon. You're impressed. Then she says, Ed, Miss Cordelia misses your apple pie. You pause. That's not dessert. That's a phrase from an older letter you'd seen weeks ago. You write it anyway. Later, you realize it's a warning. Cordelia was code for a sheriff's wife. Apple pie means someone's watching you. In this network, information flows like whiskey quietly, everywhere, and usually stronger than expected. One day, Delphine receives a telegram. She reads it, snorts, then tears it up. You sweep the bits later and spot the words. She's in Cheyenne now. Went by Lily. No other context. But the next day, Delphine moves some coin into a drawer you've never seen unlocked. Then says without looking up, time to hire another pianist. Jackson's going to take a trip. Jackson doesn't ask where. He just packs. That's how things work. You start to understand. The sisterhood is made of paper and ink and favors owed, and spite. So much spite. Madam Steele girls. Steele customers. Steele names. You once meet a woman who introduces herself as Miss Viola and speaks in the same exact cadence as Delphine down to the way she says darling. Delphine later tells you that woman used to be her bookkeeper. She learned. From the best, she says with a shrug. And she'll never be better, but she says it with a glint in her eye. Not pride, not anger. Something in between. That's the thing about this world. It's stitched together with equal parts alliance and ammunition. Every madam has a file on every other one. Some thick, some thin. Delphine's filing cabinet holds folders marked with towns you've never heard of and women you suspect she's never met, but she's still watching. Because the moment someone missteps, you send a letter, and the fire starts before anyone smells the smoke. She's sitting at her vanity when you walk past the open door, hair unpinned, half lit in the reflection. Not in performance mode, not giving orders, just quiet, still. You pause just long enough to wonder what she's thinking. Then you remember. No one gets that close, because for all her poise, for all her elegance, Miss Delphine keeps herself wrapped tighter than a corset pulled at dawn. Not just for appearances, for control. But now, after months working in her world, you've begun hearing the quieter voices. Not just hers, the girls, the staff, the ones who live beneath the glow of her silk lampshades. And what you hear? It's not all admiration. Oh, she took me in when I had nowhere else, Marta says one evening folding linens. Gave me a warm bed and said I could stay as long as I earned my keep. Then she mutters, still hasn't told me when I'm allowed to leave. It's a strange duality. Delphine as protector, Delphine as puppeteer. You ask Ruby once, cautiously, do you trust her? Ruby doesn't laugh. She just cocks her head. Trust her to what? Feed me? Keep me safe from drunks? Run me into the ground? Yeah, all of it. Historians still argue whether madams were maternal figures or master manipulators, whether they rescued lost women or trapped them in velvet cages. Truth is, the line is paper-thin, and drawn in pencil. Delphine certainly doesn't pretend to be their friend. She doesn't hug. She doesn't share meals. But when someone gets sick, she calls the doctor. When someone gets pregnant, she finds a solution. When someone wants out, she writes a reference. If you've earned it, but the price of protection is obedience. You overhear Delphine once telling, a new girl, you belong to yourself. But while you're under this roof, you're mine. Some find that reassuring. Others don't. A mainstream fact? Some madams were genuinely regarded as pillars of stability in dangerous frontier towns. They offered women shelter, income, and physical protection, often the only refuge from homelessness, starvation, or worse. In some towns, they even ran informal hospitals. A grimmer footnote? There's evidence of madams withholding wages, controlling movement, and manipulating debts to keep their girls under contract. One famously paid her women in-house, scrip-only redeemable at her own overpriced store. You start seeing these layers in every corner of the house. Elsie, the newest girl, works with a quiet intensity, always watching. She's young, too young. You're pretty sure she lied about her age. One night, she asks you what happens if she wants to leave. You don't know what to say, so you just tell her what you've seen. Delphine won't stop you, but she'll remind you what you owe. And if you can't pay it back, you let the sentence trail off, because the debts here aren't just coin. They're silk dresses, protection, meals, training, a month's worth of rouge, a broken nose she paid to fix, a sheriff she kept quiet. Every kindness becomes a chain link. Elsie nods like she already knew. Another girl, Clara, vanishes without notice. She's gone by morning. No goodbyes. No explanation. She left, Delphine says when someone asks. She wanted to try San Francisco, but Marta later finds Clara's mirror wrapped in a scarf, the one with her initials stitched into the corner. You don't know what to believe. You start noticing little things. A lock on the pantry, newly added. A room that stays closed for repairs. A girl who drinks a little more than she used to. Another who stops talking entirely. Delphine sees it all. Of course she does. But she never interferes directly. Just redirects, reroutes, REASSIGNS. She says girls need time and space and a reason to stay. You don't know if that's compassion or strategy. Probably both. One night a man comes in, loud and charming, with too much cash and too many teeth. Says he wants to buy out one of the girls. Offers double her fees for the week. Delphine declines politely, firmly. Then, when he won't let it go, she says, I've invested more into her than you earn in a year. Try again next payday. He doesn't come back. The girl never hears about it. That's protection. Or possession. Again, hard to tell. You think of all the ledgers, all the names, all the careful arithmetic of people's lives. Delphine sees her house as a system, and every person inside it is a variable dot. The ones who learn to play the game rise. The ones who don't, they disappear. But even in the machinery, there are moments of warmth. You see it in the way she tucks a blanket over Elsie when she falls asleep in the hallway, and how she leaves a brooch on Marta's pillow after a particularly hard week. She never says it out loud. She doesn't do soft, but sometimes you see her linger just a second too long outside a closed-door dot sometimes. She hums old songs when she thinks no one is listening. Sometimes you think she wishes she had someone above her, someone to say, you can rest now, you've done enough. But no one does, because Delphine is the top of the ladder, the queen in a house of mirrors. And queens don't get comfort. They just make sure everyone else believes they don't need it. You can feel it before it happens. The shift is slow like a storm building beyond the mountains, still days away, but already tightening the air. Fewer customers linger past midnight. The sheriff's visits turn from casual to clipped. The preacher's wife starts frowning when she walks by, no longer pretending not to see. It's the law, and it's turning. Delphine sees it too. Of course she does. She's been watching it in the newspaper editorials, hearing it in the tones of polite dinner guests who suddenly don't want to be seen arriving at her door. Too many new wives in town, she mutters one afternoon, looking out the parlor window, and they want somewhere to point their husbands. Guilt. You don't reply. You've learned when to stay silent. Then the ordinances begin. At first, it's minor, a new fee for entertainment licenses. A health inspection from someone who's never inspected anything but his own pockets. Then, a restriction on business hours. Delphine pays the fine, pays again, and again, but you can tell she's calculating. Always calculating. Historians still argue whether the anti-vice movements in frontier towns were driven by genuine morality or thinly veiled power grabs. In reality, they were both. Moral panic always makes a great smokescreen for land disputes and election schemes. A mainstream fact. Many towns passed laws aimed directly at parlor houses, forcing them out through taxes, fees, and outright harassment. In Tombstone and Deadwood, entire blocks were demolished under public sanitation. Projects once mining money arrived, and the town wanted to polish its image. Delphine knows the script. She's read it before. She starts to consolidate. sells a plot of land she's owned quietly for years, sends the older girls to visit family out east, sends a letter to Madame V. Crane. Contingency, she says. When you glance at the out-of-town rail schedule she leaves open on the piano, then one night they come, not the law. Worse, the committee, well-dressed men and women, smelling of starch and sanctimony. They knock politely and then step inside like they own the place. They inspect the wallpaper, comment on the furnishings, smile thinly at the girls. One woman pauses in front of you and says, "You work here, young man?" You glance at Delphine Dot. She nods once, barely perceptible. "Yes, ma'am." She frowns at your boots like you tracked in sin itself. "You should consider a different path. This place will not be here much longer." And then they leave. Just like that, Delphine doesn't speak for a while after they go. Just lights a cigarillo and exhales slowly. They've already written the ending, she murmurs. Now they're just staging the play. You ask what happens next. She smiles, but not the usual kind. This one's tired and sharp around the edges. We prepare Act 2. Over the next week, she liquidates her holdings, quietly. A shop here, a vacant lot there. All sold through proxies, old contacts, silent favors called in. She's not fleeing, she's rebuilding. But not here that the girls feel it too. Some ask questions. Others pretend not to notice. Marta starts packing early. Ruby sharpens her razors more often. Elsie walks the halls like she's afraid they'll vanish under her feet. The sheriff comes by one last time, doesn't remove his hat, doesn't sit down. Dot just says, "They're holding a vote next week. I won't be able to help after that." Delphine pours him a drink anyway. "I never expected you to," she says. And they sit in silence until he leaves. A more obscure tidbit. In some towns, madams were driven out not by official force, but by orchestrated public shame. One madam in Utah found her name printed in church pamphlets, nailed to doors, scrawled in chalk outside her building. Within a week, she closed her business and left without a word. Delphine? She'll leave with plenty of words, but only the ones she chooses. She drafts her final letter to her clientele. Elegant paper. Impeccable PENMANSHIP. It reads, "To our esteemed gentlemen and quiet supporters, Miss Delphine's will be closing its doors as of next Friday. We thank you for your discretion, your loyalty, and your occasional over-tipping. A new location may emerge in due time. If you know, you'll know. Until then, be good or be clever." You read it twice, then again. Then fold it and set it in the outgoing basket. The next day, a man in a gray suit tries to serve a formal eviction. Delphine doesn't open the door. She sends you instead with a smile and a peach tart. Tell him to enjoy the pastry and remind him I no longer own the building. You do. And when the man looks at the tart, confused, and asks, "So, where is Miss Delphine now?" You just say, "Gone for the evening," even though you both know she's standing behind the curtain, watching. It doesn't happen all at once. One day the front curtains are drawn a little tighter. Then the music stops coming from the piano. Then someone paints a crude word on the outside wall, and no one rushes to scrub it off. The place feels like it's shrinking, even though the rooms haven't moved. Delphine doesn't flinch. She never flinches. But she also doesn't unpack the latest shipment of gloves, doesn't restock the brandy, doesn't replace the broken gas sconce in the hallway. And just like that, she's already gone, even if her body's still. Here, the parlor house doesn't close with a bang. It fades. Clients come less often. The girls begin to drift out. Marta leaves with a seamstress in the next town over, says she's going to start her own very polite boarding house. Ruby disappears one night after handing you her favorite mirror and telling you, if Delphine asks, say I left with my dignity, not the whiskey barrel. You never see her again. Elsie lingers the longest. She's tougher than anyone gave her credit for. But even she finally stands at the back door one morning with her satchel and says, if she writes, let me know. But I'm not waiting anymore. You promise you will dot, and then it's just you and Delphine and a building full of furniture no one wants to sit on. Dot, you find her in the study that evening, staring at an old map of the county pinned to the wall. Her fingers rest lightly on the thumbtacks, holding down a corner, like she's waiting for it to lift and show her something better. She says without looking up, most women, like me, don't get to retire. You nod, quietly, respectfully. They vanish, she continues, fade into ghost stories, or die in some alley with all their secrets tucked into a boot. You ask what she wants to do instead. She exhales. Long, slow, I might buy a house, she says. A real one, with roses and chickens and terrible neighbors I don't need to smile at. A mainstream fact? A few madams did retire with wealth-buying property, running hotels, or simply living under new names. But many died broke, their fortunes eaten by lawsuits, bribes, or betrayal. History rarely kept them. A fringe detail? One famed madam in Colorado left behind a will, requesting she be buried in red silk with a gold coin in each hand for the next life's house fund. Delphine doesn't believe in afterlives. Not that she's told you, but she does believe in exits. The next week she hands you a folded sheet of paper. It's a title, she says, to a cabin near the river, small, quiet, enough. You look at her, stunned. For me? She shakes her head. For you to manage while I'm gone. If I come back, it's mine. If I don't, you know what to do. You nod, but you don't understand. Not entirely. Not yet. She sells the last of her property under a false name. Distributes her ledgers in 3 separate trunks. One to the bank, one to a lawyer in Denver, and one somehow ends up with Madame Crane. The house empties. Like a lung exhaling. She gives you her last pair of gloves and says, keep the brass polished, even if no one sees it. You ask, are you leaving tonight? No, she says, then pauses. But I'm not staying much longer. You don't ask where she go. You know she wouldn't answer. Instead, you help her fold the linens. One last time. Help her label the boxed perfume. Help her close the ledger that has your name in it, now written in the neat, looping hand that you'll probably try to mimic the rest of your life. And on the final day, she stands on the back steps and watches the sun set like she's judging it. Then she turns to you and says, you'll do fine, and walks down the alley. No grand goodbye. No farewell, kiss. Just the sound of her boots on the cobblestones. You check her room after she's gone. Nothing personal remains. No jewelry. No notes. just a silver fan left on the windowsill, catching the light. You leave it there, let it catch dust. Let people come by, years from now, and ask, "Wasn't this Delphine's place?" And you'll shrug, maybe smile. "She was here," you'll say, and that'll be enough. Time folds inward once she's gone. The house still stands. The mirrors still hang. The curtains sway slightly in the draft from the back alley. But without Delphine, it feels like the walls are holding their breath, as if everything in this place is waiting just in case she walks back in and takes her seat at the piano again. She doesn't, but traces of her remain. You keep the building open for a little while, just in the evenings. Locals pass through, not for entertainment anymore, but for quiet conversation, out of habit. Men sit at the bar and whisper about the past. Some of the girls send letters. Marta writes from a dress shop in Cheyenne. Ruby, if it's really her, sends a telegram from New Orleans. Still red, still sharp. Tell the piano it never played me. You smile at that dot. The town changes slowly. The new mayor bans unlicensed dance establishments. A Methodist church expands its reading room. The sheriff retires. The dry goods store doubles in size, then gets bought by a railroad clerk who wants to build a hotel. Your old parlor house? It's still there. No one's quite sure what to do with it. You sweep it daily, oil the wood, keep the plants alive. You don't have to, but it feels like part of the ritual now, like lighting a candle for someone who was never quite a ghost. Tourists pass through, young ones, the kind who've never had to bribe a health inspector or clean ash from lace. One of them asks, "Was this a school?" You tell them, sort of. Sometimes people come looking for her. They never say it out loud, but you can see it in their eyes. They linger at the stairs, stare at the piano, pretend they're here for the history. They aren't. She left behind very little that anyone would call a legacy. No descendants. No plaques. Not even a last name. Not really. But you start to notice something. The women who pass through, cooks, singers, clerks, cleaners, somehow leave with better posture, with sharper eyes, with tighter ledgers. You know who taught them? A mainstream fact? Almost nothing about madams appears in formal Western textbooks. Their names are missing, their businesses omitted, their influence blurred behind euphemisms like hospitality entrepreneur or boarding house matron. A quirky aside, a few towns have museums now. They put Delphine's kind behind glass, with velvet ropes and bad lighting. Sometimes they even get her story half right, but never fully. You make your peace with that, because you understand something. Most don't. Her legacy isn't in books, it's in how people carry themselves, and how girls walk into a room like they own the ceiling, and how young men mind their manners when they think no one's watching, and how you still run the books with perfect penmanship and a secret column labeled House Advantage. You take fewer visitors now. The house is quieter. The furniture older. Sometimes when it rains, you sit by the cold hearth and read her old letters again. The ones written in that looping imperial script. You think about what she taught you. That money is leverage. That reputation is armor. That lipstick and steel can share the same drawer. And that silence, when used right, can speak louder than any pistol. The world forgets women like her. But the world forgets a lot of things. You don't. And that, somehow, is enough. You close the ledger, you dust the fan, you straighten your collar and open the door, not for customers, not for ghosts, just for the air, just for the evening, just to keep the house breathing. The house is still now. The chairs are tucked in. The curtains are drawn. The piano, long silent, seems to hum gently in the dark, as if it remembers all the songs it once carried. Outside, the wind moves softly through the alley, and the old sign above the door creaks ever so faintly, Miss Delphine's, faded now, but still hanging. And you who swept these floors, who learned the weight of ledgers and the sharper weight of glances, you rest in the hush of it all. There's something peaceful in endings, even the ones that don't come with applause. You can still hear echoes of heels on the stair, the tinkling of a glass being set gently on wood, the low hum of a woman's voice offering tea or judgment or both. You let those echoes fade slowly, like candle smoke curling upward. This was her world, and for a little while it was yours too. And though her name might never be carved into stone, you know her story, its quiet power, its clever edges, its refusal to be erased. You feel the floorboards beneath you, worn smooth by time and footsteps. You let your breathing slow. Let your shoulders soften. Let your thoughts drift back, just a little, through the golden lamplight, through the velvet-draped nights, through the doorways she once ruled like a queen in borrowed silk, and now, with the house still and the night deepening, you can rest. You did enough. Sleep well. Sweet dreams.